So hi, it's Mike here from the Aberdeen Student Radio. I'm here with Gurinder and the famous, humongous, famous film director, which has done some films of Bend It Like Beckham. Love that film down to so many T's.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're just briefly going to talk about your previous history. How did you get into that? I did look into your previous history, and you did work in the BBC for a bit. What kind of made you decide to go from stopping the BBC to actually go into film?
Well, I started working, my first job was BBC local radio. So I used to work on the radio, Radio WM. I used to read the travel and weather.
Nice.
Always problems on the M6 and the M1 and the A38. I remember that to this day. But I actually got into the media, as we call it, because I had grown up, in the 70s, 80s, and I had been around when the National Front was very big, basically, and a lot of people like myself, came across quite a lot of racism at the time, and my parents had a shop, and so they were kind of at the brunt of a lot of stuff, and then the riots happened in the 80s, and suddenly you had second generation Asians and black kids and white kids, all kinds of people standing up and saying, you know what, this is a new Britain, this is a new country, everyone here is born here or brought up here, and Britain has to change how it sees itself. And I was very much part of that generation. And during that time, I began to realise in the reporting of these riots just how important being behind the camera was, and how powerful the camera was in terms of the visual image. And so I thought the way that I was going to change the world was become a news reporter and try and control those images. So I did journalism, went back to college, I did a course in journalism, started the radio, ended up on local news, and then really decided, you know what, that's not where it is, because the news is prescribed. You've got to tell your own stories, and you've got to find your own ways to subvert, the ideas that you're trying to challenge.
Yeah, I think...
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Subvert the ideas, yes, that you're trying to challenge. Yes, it does make sense.
Because what we see now, I think, is a lot of polished stuff, and it's not the truth. But within films, you can, try to, put the meaning into it with the camera.
Yeah, well, what I find so interesting with the news now compared to when I used to do it, when I used to work in news, when you had a news report, say a 9 o'clock news on TV, well, that's the 10 o'clock news, of course, you would have reporters out in the field interviewing people for and against whatever the issue was at the time. Now what you have is you have a reporter out in the field telling you what's going on behind them, and then that person then is in the studio and telling you more about the subject as opposed to the people involved. So, like, for example, when you're watching the news, and it's a health issue, you have, now we have the BBC's health correspondent, or if it's a political issue, now we have the BBC's political correspondent, and so you have the reporters now telling you what they've heard, what they've seen, what's going on. So it's a major difference in the way news is reported now.
Yeah. Moving on to some of your works that you've created in with films, I think it was in 1990 that you made your own film company, was it?
Yes, in 1988 I had been working in television, and I decided that I wanted to make my own film. At that point I thought I was ready, and I wanted to make a film about British Bhangra music, because to me it was the first sign of a sort of fusion really working at its best. So here was a musical tradition that was culturally incredibly mixed. It had traditional Punjabi music, it had American rap music, it had R&B, it had anything you want could be melded together to form British Bhangra music. And so my film became more about identity, and I used the music initially, and then I thought, no, I've got to broaden it from there. And so we I decided to interview 4 young Asians and ask them if they considered themselves British. And the 4 I interviewed one was from Scotland, one was from Northern Ireland, one was from England, and one was from Wales. So I think it was the first time for a lot of people they were seeing people with brown skin talking in very regional accents. And I remember the Scottish girl, for example, she was from Glasgow, and I said, would you consider yourself British? And she said, I'd prefer to be called a Scottish Pakistani rather than British, and the Northern Irish saw himself as a Northern Irish.
Mm-hmm. So it's such a clash.
Yeah, and so ever since then, all my work really has been about exploring identity and opening up this concept of what England represents and what Englishness represents.
I think that's a main key in your films, and it clearly is shown. So what are the new projects you're working on?
The new projects I'm working on, I've done a lot of comedies, as you will have seen.
Just to talk about comedies, it's been described as kind of like awkwardness, and that's what is brilliant, because you can watch it again and it's still got that magic.
Oh, thank you. Have you seen It's a Wonderful Afterlife, the last film I made?
Yeah.
Okay, because not a lot of people saw that, and that's a shame, because I think that film is a bit out there. It's the first Asian horror film, comedy horror film.
But it's good to go there.
It is good to go there, and it's funny. I mean, it's about an Indian mum who's so obsessed about getting her daughter married, and people in the community are really mean about this girl because she's a bit fat and she's not exactly beautiful, and the mother's had enough, so anyone who's mean about her daughter, the mother decides to kill,
Yeah.
And that's radical, obviously, but it's taken the piss out of our obsession with marriage. So from that, I'm now going into a very serious area, and I want to make a film set in 1947 and the transfer of power from Britain to India, and exactly what went on at that time during.
That sounds really magical. I can't wait to see that on the screen
during the partition. Yeah.
So what do you reckon as film? Just the last question, because we have to wrap up. In the sense of, do you reckon film is moving forward, or is it going into like its own criteria from something else?
Well, I wish we had the opportunity to see more what people would call art films. I wish there were more cinemas, more distributors, more audiences out there, to see films that we never get to see. Maybe you'll see at film festivals, but that's about it. We used to see loads of art house films, but that doesn't really happen in quite the same way anymore. And we're getting a lot of Hollywood stuff, which stays in the cinemas for a long time, and so it's very hard for British films to survive, because often they need word of mouth and they need a long time, to build up their audiences. But with Hollywood making so many films, it's about quantity and not quality there, so British films get thrown out very quickly, and that's a shame. And also, I just think that people don't take enough risks with British films. People kind of want to emulate Hollywood or make sort of very safe films, and I think that's wrong, because we're never going to get our maverick filmmakers, and we're never going to get really interesting films if people kind of are always looking for the next person who's going to go to Hollywood.
Last question, quick question. When you're on set, do you have like a favourite course or something, or do you have like a ritual or something like that, in the sense of like, do you eat a certain food or something like that?
I eat everything. We have 2 rituals actually. One is that on the first day of the very first shot that we do, we always break a coconut. We always say a sort of Sikh chant, which is Bole Sonia, and then I smash coconut like that, and everyone's there for that occasion, and everyone cheers, because everyone feels like they're part of the beginning of the journey then, and then that coconut is then gone off and shredded, and everyone has a bit of that. And the second thing is that we always have proper film caterers, but we treat our crew now and again, and we always get Indian caterers in as well. So what ends up happening is that all the English crew have the curry and all the Indians have the English food.
Well, that's been an absolute pleasure. I wish I could talk a bit more.
Thanks, Mike.
Unfortunately, we're pressed for time. Thank you very much.
All the best.